So, where we left off, when cultural elements are copied from a minority culture by members of a dominant culture, and these elements are used outside of their original cultural context, sometimes even against the expressed stated wishes of members of the originating culture, this is cultural appropriation. Whew, that was a lot of words. Let's break that down. So, when parts of one culture are copied, by members of another culture, and they are then used outside of their original purpose, especially when the original culture said, we don't want you to use those things that way. That is cultural appropriation. So let's give an example. Let's give an example of blue people that live by the ocean and green people that live by the mountains. The blue people live by the ocean, and they believe that seashells are beautiful and great to make and give offerings to gods. And when you wear seashells, it means that you have received a message from God. People that live by the mountains, they don't hold this same belief about the seashells, but they think they're pretty. So they start wearing the same seashell necklaces as the blue people, and the blue people get upset. But the green people, they live in the mountains. They're the people in charge. They get to kind of do what they want without any type of getting in trouble. That would be cultural appropriation. The Green Mountain people took something important to the Blue Ocean people, and they took it without asking, and they took it even when the Blue people said don't, and then they used it in a way that is not the way that the Blue people originally used it. Now, obviously, that is a very generic example, but that's what that big long sentence just said. If we go back to the article, cultural appropriation is considered harmful by various groups and individuals, including indigenous people working for cultural preservation. So, in other words, if you're a member of a culture that has smaller numbers and not a lot of power, you're probably trying to make sure that your culture lasts. But when people keep taking things from your culture, that doesn't let you hold on to your own culture and keep it the way it is. Cultural appropriation is considered harmful by those who advocate for collective intellectual property rights of the originating minority culture. So it says, indigenous intellectual property is an umbrella legal term used in national and international forums to identify indigenous peoples' claims of collective intellectual property rights to protect specific cultural knowledge of their groups. So, in other words, this big word, collective intellectual property rights, what's that saying is that certain groups of people came up with certain ideas. And because they came up with those ideas are the intellectual property of that group of people. And that's important when we're talking about property rights, because if that's your property, that means you own it, you have the right to it. Okay. Cultural appropriation can also include exploitation of another culture's religious and cultural traditions, fashion, symbols, language, and music. In other words, you're taking something from another culture and you are now benefiting from it, profiting from it, but you're not giving anything back to that original culture. That's what they mean when they're saying exploitation of another culture's religious and cultural traditions, fashions, symbols, language, and music. We will pick up from here in the next video.